Mr. A.R.L. Sundaresan, sir, Senior Advocate and President of the Madras Bar Association, to welcome the gathering and introduce our speaker for today.
Good morning, all. Nice to be in touch with all of you during this troubled times, at least through this online session. We are grateful to our Lordship, Honorable Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, Judge Supreme Court of India, our former Chief Justice, for having accepted and spared time for this session on right to freedom of speech with specific interest on fake news, etc. Honorable Judge does not need any introduction. Honorable Judge was with us for quite some time and was kind to the bar and brought orderly functioning of the Madras High Court, and boycott-free courts started after our Lordship was here. We are grateful to your Lordship for having agreed for this session, and I welcome your Lordship. And I thank Arvind Pandian in particular and members of the MBA Academy for having arranged for this useful session. I welcome all the persons who are waiting to listen to the Honorable Judge. Now I request the Honorable Judge to give the lecture. Thank you.
Firstly, a very warm welcome to all my friends in Chennai, and in these troubled times, to get an opportunity to be able to talk to you is a great privilege itself. I'm normally a frequent traveler to Chennai almost every 2-3 months, and this period has stopped my travel also, so like everybody else. So I think this is the best method of interaction for the time being. We were discussing what to speak on. I thought about it, and then the idea of the subject of freedom of speech in these times appealed to me, because the challenges I feel of these times are a little different with respect to the topic which we are discussing, as also the problem of arising from the expansion of technology which has taken place. This technology has created various methods of communication and spreading of information, and with that has brought the problem also of fake news and misinformation. And in times when people are not able to touch base with each other, and the only method of communication is through these technologies, this causes a far larger problem and is a greater challenge, I think, than even in normal times. Needless to say that the freedom of speech is something which our constitution makers valued greatly, and gave a great emphasis by including it and giving a special privilege in Part 3 of the Constitution of India. And this is the valued aspect of any democratic polity. There are various reasons why freedom of speech is important. And if I would categorize them, firstly, there would be the search for truth.
Yes, bro.
In the marketplace of idea, as Holmes and Stuart Mill would say. So, when you try to ferret out what is the truth, you must listen to different points of view. To listen to different points of view, you must have the right to say what you want. Of course, the Constitution provides for a limited restriction, because all freedoms come with some responsibility. Then there is also an aspect of self-governance. The public has to have knowledge of all the facts and circumstances before participating in the governance. Unless they know what is happening, what the dispensation of power which is there feels and says, as also what a different point of view may like to say, is essential for purposes of creating a healthy self-governance environment. There is also an aspect of self-fulfillment and autonomy, which is that any human being who has a mind and has the ability to think should be able to exercise the capacity for human rationality to create and express in a symbolic system central to any rationality of speech and writing. So a freedom of speech permits and encourages exercise of these capacities. In doing so, it nurtures the self-respect which a mature person has and gives an avenue to express their point of view in a manner which is not physical in character. And that is how a society evolves. It is also important to keep in mind this is the checking value system. It keeps in check and on abuse of power, because any form of power, wherever there is an absolute power, there is a problem. So the fact that these inter-se checks helps not only the persons to express their views of the governance, but also of the governing to people who are governing to understand what is being felt about how they are running the systems. And the emergency is a great example of it, where the governance lost, apart from deprivation of the rights of liberty and others, it deprived the government of the ability to get flow of information in a right manner to gauge what the people were thinking. Then is the issue of how you accept a tolerant society. What do you define a tolerant society to be? And if we say that we are a tolerant society, for that matter, any society, free speech helps to shape the intellectual character of the society, encouraging tolerance of different ideas. So, in a true democracy like India, you can have people who believe in the right economic thinking, people who believe in a centrist economic thinking, a left economic thinking, the communists. So we have shades of opinion, different opinions, and the choice is with the people to determine what system would govern them both economically and politically. But the key remains the democratic quality, which in turn requires that an exchange of ideas should take place so that the democratic quality is a meaningful system which is there. Absence of free speech also results in a conformity of character, which means there is a lack of information, so there will be lack of dissent which is available. So conformity and dissent are aspects which must also emerge from this aspect of free speech. And free speech and character, apart from it, encourages traits such as inquisitiveness, distrust of authority, willingness to take initiative. And therefore, the mind of any human being, which is a thinking process, requires a translation of those ideas into a method of speech so that it can be conveyed. The greatest importance, I feel, is that this obviates the need of settling disputes by a physical force. In fact, the court institutions are for that very purpose, and which is also, in a sense, an area for expression of freedom of speech. Why do we say that a free judiciary is important, or independent courts are important? These institutions are important to us because only when these institutions exist are people able to express and settle their disputes in a proper manner. This in turn requires an element of free speech to be able to put forth their points of view in court and outside court, and to say what is their beliefs, and these beliefs can be used to persuade others. It is not only a question of your belief. Free speech gives you the option of persuading the others to your point of view. So the crux of any independent democracy, of a free court systems, of the separations of power which exist, all in turn are based on this very essential element of the freedom of speech. John Stuart Mill spoke of the need for protection from tyranny of the majority and for preventing the democratic majority from forcing their will on the minority. Milton and Brandes spoke about the need to protect dissenters. And Milton believed that citizens should hear good, bad, and thereby learn the true patience. Brennan emphasized the need to protect offensive or disagreeable ideas. And more recently, the Chief Justice of USA, Roberts, said, to preserve freedom of speech, America must protect even hurtful speech on public issues to ensure that we do not stifle public debate. If I may say so, the very, very bedrock of any democratic system is this freedom of speech, more than possibly any other aspect. Of course, though the Part 3 contains many freedoms and rights. When you say, talk about any of the freedoms, most of them, the aspect of free speech in some sense, and that freedom runs through them. India, in the present scenario, what is the challenge? This is what I thought would give a basis of what we say about the freedom of speech. I'm not getting into digression into issues of referring to judgments, etc. Most of them are, or few listeners are legal people, and that's available in the books. But the purpose was to convey my thoughts on this issue. Now, let us first see a non-COVID time to a COVID time to be able to appreciate the challenge better of the current times. It is a matter of concern, I feel, that even prior to a COVID period, we are slowly becoming, if I may use the word, increasingly intolerant of opinions that do not match ours. And this is prevalent in all sections, unfortunately, I feel it arising. So, what is perceived as the middle path becomes the casualty. There are not always blacks and whites. There are various shades of grey. There are people who may agree with part of one opinion and may agree with another part of that opinion. And therefore, as a democrat polity, how to understand and appreciate another point of view while disagreeing with it and tolerating becomes an important aspect. So, you have phraseologies, if I may use, that if particular people hold a point of view, you will categorize them as a Modi Bhakt or urban Naxal or an AAP supporter. There may be different political views which may be in existence. But in this different political views also, the ability to convey your idea is important. Where is that in the last number of years? These tolerance levels have started going down. And I use the phrase for every section because often people who are calling another section intolerant become equally intolerant themselves for another point of view. So the shades of grey which I am talking about suffer. And you get into only blacks and whites. In order to protect the rights of individual to be able to freely express their point of view, it may be most ridiculous, it may be, in your perception, a vague thought or expression, but he has the right to say that, and that's what is important. It is in that context, I had said in Perumal Murugan case that if you do not like a book, throw it away. Because there is no compulsion to read a book. And literary tastes may vary, but what is right and acceptable to one may not be to the others. Yet the right to write is unhindered. Now, much before saying so, while upholding M.F. Hussein's right to paint, which was fortunately at that time upheld by the Supreme Court, I had expressed the belief that in a real democracy, the dissenter must feel at home and ought not to be nervously looking over his shoulder, fearing captivity or body harm, or economic and social sanctions for his unconventional and critical views. So there should be freedom for thought, be hate. However, Having said all these things, as I look at a scenario today, not long time back, I doubt whether Mills or Milton or great advocates of free speech thereafter, or the makers of our constitution, envisage the kind of misinformation, fake news, which technology has brought in, and which is a part of the age in information, and the ease with which it can be spread in this new media age. I, for one, also did not, when I wrote all this, think of the propensity of disruption which could be caused by the new age media. This is so especially in the context of that a lot of observations are made because in the traditional system of newspaper writings, of authors writing their opinion, of even initially the TV channels and others, they evolved over a period of time. So those rights during the evolution brought their own sense of responsibilities. Editors of a newspaper were giants in their own field, and they had a great say, much more say than even the owners. So you had the Girilal Jains, the Nihal Singhs, the Arun Shoris, and a lot of such people who, as editors, ran newspapers themselves. And therefore, the sense of responsibility which was prevalent in them not only has the modern system, I would say, diluted it to some extent, because it starts competing with different forms. So, the newspaper, the written material is a challenge with the visual aspects through the TV. For now, newspapers in most parts, large part of the country is not available, or it's now being given somewhere. I at least don't get a newspaper, so the electronic form of newspaper is being circulated. So there seems to be in some way a competition between the newspapers trying to compete with the media as it exists. Inter-see the media is trying to be sometimes more virulent than the other. And they in turn are competing with aspects like Twitter, WhatsApp, Facebook, where information goes like a lightning, and without responsibility for dissemination of that information. The first question that comes to my mind in this scenario would just be that can such fake news and misinformation be called speech of expression as used in Article 19(1)(a) of our Constitution? Is this also a kind of a speech or expression that makers of our Constitution were referring to? If the answer to the question is yes, then should such speech expression ought to be restricted? In a recent in a judgment in Dennis versus United States of the early 50s, it was said that not every type of speech occupies the same position of the scale of values. There is no substantial public interest in permitting certain kind of utterances: the lewd, the obscene, the profane, the libelous, and the insulting or fighting words. Those which by their very utterances inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of peace. On the other hand, is the interest in free speech, the right to exert all governmental powers in aid of maintaining our institutions and resisting their physical overthrow does not include intolerance of opinions and speech that cannot do harm, although opposed and perhaps alien to dominant traditional opinion. Therefore, let us ask ourselves, does permitting circulation of fake news and misinformation further any of the reasons for which freedom of speech and expression is valued? Some of the factors and elements that courts appear have to take into consideration while deciding whether a restriction of speech is reasonable or not are firstly the intention with which the speech and expression is made, the effect or consequence or even the probable consequence of that speech. Sometimes quotes are even influenced by the general prevailing circumstances and political conditions. And in these parameters, let us now see how fake news and information in the age of COVID becomes a greater problem. And we come to the COVID period from the pre-COVID period. If I may identify, there are three main actors in this. There are people who are holding position of power and influence. They may be journalists, they may be politicians, they may be celebrities. The second is the anonymous authors of WhatsApp forwards, memes and other fake news and misinformation being shared on social media. And the third is those who forward the misinformation and fake news generated by me. This is so that, and especially in these days when other methods of people being occupied are less, the time spent on these is much more than even when normal activity is on. And we have seen how information often, say in WhatsApp, where not most of you are there, would be forwarded from one to the other, even without any thought process. Something comes and you forward it, and from there it goes to the next one. But this is more apparent from the fact that at times you'll see in the same WhatsApp group, people not even reading what is being posted but forwarding. So the same WhatsApp would be forwarded 2-3 times within a span of a short period of time. It itself being circulated just prior to that time. The object of the last one, when it is forwarded, is of course to help the others, and would normally have acted bona fide in the belief that the information is true and correct. Though I would say that it is also being forwarded in a sense mindlessly, because you are not even seeing whether that information has already been forwarded, and you not care to wait and see or verify whether that information is correct or not. It is left for the person receiving the information to judge, and that person in turn will further forward information without leaving it to the third person to judge, and in a short span of time there is a complete widespread information, whether even if it is incorrect and false. Then we have question that should there be a burden on such a person to verify the accuracy of the information being shared by him. C is slightly different, the last part I said, but so far as the first two are concerned, the intents may vary, but it would be difficult to appropriately generalize them. Now, in this period of time in COVID, there is a lot of information and news available on the internet, on social media, concerning, for example, the alleged remedies, cures, and even preventive measures. The origin of the virus, how did it originate, allegations about people who are helping to spread the virus, including by not following lockdown measures by the government. And some of these news then take racial and religious colors. Issues whether China has spread the virus deliberately or not. Is it to cause economic damage? Particular communities, whether they believe that this problem will be solved of its own, or whether they have created the problem. So, this kind of misinformation in a time period when, as it is, people are more secluded in their environments, creates a great problem in the minds of the people, which will have a reflection not only in the current times, but I believe can have a reflection in a longer time frame. To get out of that mental process, even when slowly things start opening as are expected to. Some, if not all, of this information is really misinformation, and I would say fake news. Now, some may be arising from beliefs. For example, the remedies, even to the extent that we had petitions under Article 32 being filed that issue a mandamus that a particular remedy must be enforced, medical remedy, or another remedy be enforced. Naturally, the courts did not intervene because this is not their job. But the question is, if there is such misinformation and fake news, who will determine whether this should be disseminated or not? Government may have more pressing concerns at the moment, and giving powers to the government carries its own challenges, because the possibility of it being misused always remains. The spread of some of the misinformation and fake news may be harmless. For example, if somebody says, "Oh, this kind of simple medication is helpful," or "this kind of food may or may not be helpful," but any threat to public health, safety, and public order may incite people to an offense that there may be possibility of committing offenses, even when things open up. Forget even in the current environment. We have had past examples of this misinformation, even in normal times, causing grave problem. In 2017, a rumor of a band of child kidnappers made the rounds of WhatsApp, creating an angry mob that ultimately killed 4 innocent men, according to the New York Times. Later, 3 more men were killed by another mob. There was no evidence of any men were actual kidnappers. So how will this be determined? We had example in Delhi, I remember many years back, when it was alleged that a particular headmistress of a school was taking the girls towards the wayward ways, and the parents almost lynched the person. The police saved the person, the lady, from being lynched, and ultimately found that it was really a completely fake news made for publicity's sake. So, if these can be in the aggravating position in normal circumstances, the spread of fake news during this time period, if that is assimilated in the mind, then the possibility of it exploding when things start opening poses a great danger to my mind. Issue is, as I said before, should steps be taken to prevent publication of such disinformation and fake news? And to the extent to which this should be curtailed and how? Can it be left to the government, which is also a problematic idea? In ideal world, speech can rebut speech, and so such fake news as information can be rebutted by the truth. But despite the fact that a large number of scientists have been working on trying to find a solution, the response to COVID-19, the false information is itself, to my mind, a virus. In fact, it has the propensity of affecting people in the longer run, even more than the virus for which some solution may be found. Turning to the challenges now being posed by the social media, what is the difficulty in controlling them? The United Nations Human Rights Council passed a non-binding resolution in June 2016, recognizing internet as a basic human right. 2015, far back, there were 3.5 billion people in the world who accessed internet. On Facebook, there were 3 million photographers updated per day. In every minute, it was said that 510 comments and about 3 lakh statuses are posted. More than 5 years back, there were 200 billion tweets on Twitter. These are figures to show how immense is the ability to disseminate such information which may be false. Now, therefore, there is a distinction between publication on the internet and publication in the print media. And the challenges by these forms of dissemination of information is far greater. The high speed, the high volumes of this dissemination renders a pre-censorship highly difficult. So the important difference is that what can be done is only to remove what is the disinformation or misinformation which is prevalent, and how to make people understand that automatic uploading without application of mind on the part of these platforms would create a problem. There are aggregators or facilitators often referred to as intermediaries, which is recognized by this court. Social media platforms do have their codes and guides for prohibiting, for instance, hate speech. But this issue is even more being debated now in view of certain developments in the US, and I saw some aspects being debated in the visual media also on this aspect arising therefrom. What extent is the liability of Google is an issue which reached the highest court on several occasions. This is pre and post amendments to Section 79 of the IT Act. But as things stand today, post amending and reading down the Section 79 in pursuance to the Shia single case, the liability of an intermediary is limited and effectively only arises when the intermediary fails to remove or take down information in violation of a takedown order. The debate I saw the other day was on the basis that suppose the platform itself becomes an instrument of propagating a particular viewpoint and would remove only an opposite viewpoint, then that platform has the immense capacity to influence people over a period of time and create also unrest if unnecessary. So that debate was how to deal with the situation. Whether a government action is necessary, but I keep repeating that government controls have always their own problem. Whether a law will come or not, this is already in debate. In 2018, this debate started in the monsoon session of Parliament on misuse of social media platforms and spreading of fake news. Motion was admitted and the detailed statement was made on behalf of the government. Draft rules were prepared, and the draft information technology intermediary guidelines amendment rules proposed to increase the burden to regulate the intermediaries and also give government greater and easier access to data exchanged through these intermediaries. Those draft rules are in different stages of scrutiny, and the issue will be when the Parliament now debates in the post-COVID time. How will it go? See, it has always been said earlier that the pen is mightier than the sword. But today, the pen has been replaced by the keyboard, access to which is today in hands of everybody. So, specialized knowledge to express your point of view or your opinion as authors, writers, journalists is not a confined space. So, anybody or everybody who knows anything about it or doesn't know anything about it on these platforms come and, if one may say, the language becomes more and more abusive and oppressive. And the decorum and decencies are lost at times because there are such strong views that there is an intolerance to the other view itself. There is no writing in that sense as earlier was, with some knowledge and sense of responsibility. And this has, of course, been a casualty in the present age of social media. Let us look at even aspects of trolling. So, if that particular viewpoint is not liked, a different viewpoint may troll it. So, I came across a lady who had been educated in Harvard talking that she had a particular viewpoint which may not be in conformity with some of the alumni from that university. And almost a threat was held out that she should be taken off from the alumni because that was not the predominant point of view of the alumni. These are all examples I'm giving how intolerance in every sphere is causing a problem and aggravating situation. We also have a problem because, see, if the press is writing, the press are given badges. The editors, publishers are responsible for the content of publication under the Press and Registration Act. Every person can't get work published. Writing is the bread and butter of the journalists and writers, and hence these people certainly act with more sense of responsibility. While there may be other people who may be doing different jobs, but utilize their free time for not propagating the point of view, but abusing another point of view. That makes the difficulty. And in that process, even creating news which is not the truth or is fake. So the checks and balances which are prevalent in regulated professions are not available on such platforms. Internet is a free platform. You can publish anything. And the writers have nothing at stake. So the shares of these writing have even less at stake. Will just be transmitting it, which is a complete absence of checks and balances and no accountability for what is published on these forums. Yet the reach of these social medias is so immense and widespread as compared to the traditional forms of publishing. Those forms of publishing are feeling a challenge. Now, we are seeking a data boom absolutely. And people who don't have access to newspaper and books have access to phones and WhatsApp and Facebook. Now, everything is even at the phone level. So, and phones is something which with the current technology is available to most people, even segments of society which may not be economically that well off. It is almost a necessity, a mobile phone which is being used. So, in a traditional television programs, films, newspaper, there is a viewership of the reader. The choice of the reader or viewer is limited to viewing that content or reading the same. Internet works on a different principle, and the viewer has complete control, and he exercises his choice as what content he would wish to read and view. But the point is that when especially in these present times, where we keep saying that I've been saying, don't read what you don't like, don't see what you don't like. The confinement in the areas of space, the curtailment of any work, the lack of employability, the lack of engagement of mind, this has become a major source of information, entertainment, occupation of time, whatever way you may call it. So the times which people are spending on watching a mobile phone and a WhatsApp is much greater. So in that sense, it poses the greatest challenge. As say for Facebook, they said there are more than 200 million users in India. Maximum information is possibly spread through WhatsApp. The IT Act, Section 69A, the government has the power to issue blocking orders. But that has its own limitations because of the area in which they can intervene, and rightly so, because no unrestricted right for curtailment was to be given. Twitter or Instagram or no posting on WhatsApp as such, which can be taken down or blocked, are aspects which are challenged, especially say WhatsApp is protected and encrypted. Now that protects privacy, which is another aspect of the right. But in the bargain, anything and everything can be disseminated without checking up. To my mind, one of the most important things is a long-term measure, but there has to be a greater awareness. not to share information without verification. I know it is easier said than done. But this is what I began by saying, that mindlessly sharing information without verification is a large part of the problem. Because if one or two people give this misinformation and others don't spread it, then the problem can be, if not obliterated, at least curtailed. But if everybody starts mindlessly advancing them, then the problem increases. The Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology had issued an advisory on 20th March that all social media platforms to curb fake news and misinformation on coronavirus. It was sent after noticing what was happening. This is one example how from the beginning of the problem, misinformation about this very subject in this environment, even by the government, was perceived to be a great challenge. There are concerns, as I mentioned, of trolling on social media. There are concerns of obscenity. Now, you had the example of a boys' locker group on Instagram. There is still a debate what happened. And as it unfolded, many ramifications came out. Some boy has taken his life, unfortunately. Somebody was trying to test, as they say, a friend of his. But look at the ramifications that went on. So, and there is in public an outcry when these things occur. And there is a demand for instant justice. That is another aspect of the problem. See this, I'm not defending that the court system is taking too much of time. I fully believe that in this day of this technology, therefore, an earlier dispensation of justice system is very important. But instant justice can also do great injustice, because it's just a herd mentality which takes over. And you feel on the basis of some information, somebody has done wrong without any verification. Till you are at the receiving end of it. That's why I keep saying that when you endeavor to do street justice, please remember you can be at the end of that someday, depending on how the situation develops. Hate speech is another aspect which is creating a problem in many ways during this period of time. Speech may be attacking the government for every measure taken to handle the current situation, and then corresponding actions being taken. So what is happening is it's part of a overall intolerance of the different viewpoints, which is, to my mind, causing this problem. The instruments to propagate a view have exceeded the limits, I feel, at times. And what has to be taken is a step back to not only verify information in these times, but count 10 times before you respond to something. That could help in trying to gather a middle path, which is necessary. My concern, as I said, is also that this rise in hate speech, or seditious speech, or any of these aspects, are we taking offense too easily? Have we lost every sense of humor also? Something I always think, the only thing from the British we needed to inherit, and we haven't. The good sense of humor and a society discipline. So, have we become so intolerant and are provoked so easily? And this is apparent from, look at how on aspects of religion, on different aspects of social thinking, people just rush to court. How on films being shown, on series being shown, there appears to be intolerance to even the slight concept of there being something which is different from what you believe in. Any regulation of social media, the problem is there is some impingement of free speech and the right to privacy. Given the structure of the social media implementing the existing law, it becomes very close to impossible to control it. The struggle, therefore, is the view to regulate social media without regulation of the free speech. This method of disinformation during this time, examples have come from different countries also. So, for example, in Austria, the region of Steyr area, the Anti-Discrimination Office reported on state-sponsored app Ban Hate developed for tracking online hate speeches and the content blaming refugees for, say, COVID-19. Similarly, in Italy, the wave of xenophobia and hate speeches against a particular community from the country where this problem arose has been an issue. And therefore, reports of this nature, there is a misinformation and fake news propaganda propensity which has got more aggravated during this period of time and creating hostility against identifiable groups. And I think it's a challenge for all of us. How can we be more responsible? How do we disseminate what is accurate, what is not accurate, and what can be the methodology of controlling this? There is a marketplace of ideas which is there. The idea is to also make everybody think what is the possibilities which can happen, and find out solutions, because a large part of this audience is people from the legal fraternity, and they are, I think, the best suited to determine how the balancing should take place. I would also say this, that this kind of intolerance is also reflected at times in both against the institutions, including the judiciary at times. I say with some hesitation and trepidation, but the judiciary performs a particular role. It doesn't have an opportunity to respond. Criticism of a viewpoint, judgment, there is no problem, because I have always believed the judgment is an opinion. It's an opinion, it may hold tomorrow, it may not hold tomorrow. Courts review their own opinions. So you may also sometimes criticize if you think a particular philosophy is taking root. But when imputation and grading starts being made, I think we damage the very institutions. The unfortunate part is some of us who have been part of this institution itself, whether from this side of the bench and the bar, because most of us have been members of the bar, and even people who have joined the bench, or people who have joined the bench. There is a problem that of after me the deluge, which is that since we are gone, everything is going wrong. I would say that itself is a danger. We are an evolving society, things will evolve. Things have evolved over a period of time. People in the past who speak about it also committed many mistakes and blunders. But to remain in news has also become a problem. Therefore, the tendency to be more critical, and critical in a manner which I would say crosses certain lines, is a problem. This is also to some extent of the pandemic or the information pandemic also which is taking place, the misinformation pandemic. I hope that there is a rethink on this process, and members of the bar, of the public, part of the judiciary who have been here, must appreciate the challenges of any time and challenges of a system. And while criticism is always information, that must come to us. I think some boundaries need to be maintained, because otherwise it becomes a part of a disinformation, which causes doubts on institutions. And I don't think that's good for any system, because if you mistrust everybody, mistrust every system, and we have no system, then you have anarchy. If you have to prevent anarchy, faith in institutions is important. Those institutions also owe an obligation to stand by certain norms, but people who have been part of the institutions also owe to the institutions to see that it is not unnecessarily vilified, and not vilified in a manner which causes damage to the institution itself. I hope we have better times to come by. I am hopeful that the Almighty, from where this thing has occurred, there will be some way to take this away. We will see better economic time. We will see more functional courts the normal way, not only the virtual courts, which is the need of the day, but has its own challenges. And I'm confident all of us will emerge stronger, both as a country and as the world, and realize how the problems can be common. We have been talking in terms of that the nationalism is more out of the day, and that the world becoming one place has suffered damage. But I feel while people may be protecting their smaller turfs, the realization that there can be a pandemic of this magnitude which affects the world at large, irrespective of the power of that country, and that any amount of science and technology and warfare could not prevent it, is an example how the human race must learn to live with itself, live with other beings, and live with this earth, because this present process is in some way a protest by nature against the human race, putting the human race into their rooms and houses, so that other methods of life and the nature revitalizes itself. That, I think, should be a learning experience for the human race, that we have to change, we have to mend ourselves, because this world, the earth, is meant for not only the human race, but meant for many other living forms and the nature, and destruction of nature and other forms of living affects the balance which produces such results. This is a little off from the topic, but I think unless the human race learns from this experience, we will face a greater problem. And if we emerge stronger, I'm sure we'll see a better world. Thank you very much for the patience and time given.
Thank you very much, Lordship, for giving us such a wonderful insight, very open and frank account of the topic. I now call upon a good friend of mine, Arvind Srivatsa, to pose you his first question. Arvind?
Thank you, my lord. Is my lord able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you. Yes, thank you.
My lord, thank you for the wonderful lecture. My lordships were pleased to refer to the provisions of the Disaster Management Act.
Yes.
My lord, with reference to misinformation vis-a-vis COVID, Section 54 of the Act talks about false warnings. And also, my lord, Section 505(1)(b) of the IPC talks about spreading of information with intent to cause any obstruction with peace and tranquility in the country.
Yes.
My lords, these two candidly capture the test wherein the state can regulate whether such information is misinformation or correct. Well, also, my question to your lordship is, there seems to be a conflict between right to information, that is right not to be misinformed to the larger public, versus the right to freedom of speech and expression as a citizen in the country. How, therefore, in my lordship's view, will we resolve that conflict?
See, what has to be seen is, these are challenging times. There are different times. What what parameters will apply in normal times cannot apply here. For example, if you have a war, a physical war with another country, some different parameters take over for that period of time. And there are curtailments of certain rights which arise during this period. So, when such a disaster strikes, there is bound to be some curtailment of certain rights which will occur. We are also faced with another problem here that nobody knows any better how this problem is arisen, when this problem will go, how will it pan out. So it's even different from a war. It's an undisclosed enemy. So I think all over the world, countries are experimenting in trying to find a solution. And therefore, till we find a solution, until this act is enforced, there is bound to be some curtailment of rights, and a trust in institutional establishment has to take place, subject to their accountability. Yes, I'm not saying they are not accountable, and I would say there is a greater responsibility on the governments of the day to give the correct disclosure to people, so that the level of this disinformation is also reduced.
Thank you, Milord.
Lord, Bharani Dharan has a question. Bharani, please go ahead.
My Lord, thank you for the very valuable and informative session. My Lord, what is your valuable opinion and suggestion to strike a balance between the freedom of speech on one hand and at the same time to prevent the dissemination of misinformation, especially during this ongoing crisis?
See, Bharti, the problem is that any democracy goes on the basis of responsible citizenry. Of course, there will be deviant people, but a large part of the citizenry should be responsible. What happens in these times of COVID is that there is a disturbed frame of mind in most of the people. You are suddenly locked up, your work is stopped, people are scared of losing their jobs, have lost jobs. People are worried how will be the tomorrow. Lawyers may be aware when the courts will, how will they function. Students are worried that how will the education start from primary level to the highest level. And these are one of the biggest challenges I feel are education institutes, the courts, apart from the hospitality and travel industry and all other things. So when you are confronted with this, your mind is most susceptible to accepting misinformation as information. Therefore, I think some greater regulation becomes necessary from the point of view of curtailment of this by even the platforms. And secondly, more thinking and responsible citizens should help in this process by giving the true views and yet not taking extreme postures. When the thinking people start taking talking in a uncontrolled manner, I think we have a problem at hand, and this is happening to my mind where educated people are also going in extreme directions, and this, in fact, in turn, is not going to improve the situation but cause damage to institutions. These are times when it is a challenging time for everybody, including all institutions, governments, boards, challenging time for people. You can't grade the institutions and people during this period of time.
Thank you. Lordship. We have Ashwin Prem Sundar who has a question. Ashwin, please go ahead.
My lords, are you able to, am I audible, my lords?
Yes, very much so, very much.
My lords, you had spoken about a certain topic on fake news creators, which are basically categorized into three: influencers, creators, and forwarders.
Yes.
My question is more relevant to the creators. Now, reasonable restrictions under Article 19(2) and more specifically towards public order in this COVID times. there is a thin line that separates mere criticism of government, which is predominantly done by the creators of fake news and things, and certain aspects of sedition, which incites disaffection towards the government. Now, what would be your lordship's take on the entire aspect, and what is the judicial test that would come in to segregate these two lines so that we are very clear that mere criticism, even during COVID times, is not considered as an offence under Section 124A of IPC, and or it is a clear-cut indication that this is sedition. I mean, this is something which is not required at this particular point in time. Your response?
Let me first begin with, when in these times, I would say there is a greater responsibility with the government, and there has to be a greater faith and trust with the government, because people may not know better, and that's true of all institutions. People may not know better, and the information flow is with the government. But that in turn brings a lot of greater responsibility on them to manage the situation to the best possible. I don't think criticism of a policy, criticism how things have to be handled, how things are being handled or will be handled, is sedition by any stretch of the imagination. Sedition is something different, but when you say thin line, the thin line starts where, suppose there is a concerted group which gets into a campaign or what I may call the infodemic, information problem, and the objective is to create disinformation, to create uncertainty in the society, then it becomes a thin line. Even then, I would say it's a thin line. I would still say that one would weigh in favor of giving them the benefit of doubt of a thought process or their beliefs. And it has to be something very serious to be able to take it the other way. Even in these times, I think only the line is slightly round back, that's all. It's not that the line is obliterated.
Your lordship's view is a very liberal view, so to that extent, I think.
No, that I feel in any democratic polity that is there, but I think we are facing very difficult challenges. Therefore, I'm saying we need to think. Difficult challenges is that not of a thought or a philosophy which has always been open in the country, but the non-tolerance of the other thought and philosophy. If I may say, it's always A calls B is intolerant. The point is B is also the other one is also equally intolerant of the other point. The concept of coexistence of viewpoints is getting lost in this picture, and it is coming back to what in Hindi is called tu main mein, which is you get into a petty and abusive fight. And it is abusive in character. You see the language. I mean, I've seen the most horrendous language, even by liberal standards. You don't go around abusing everybody, but that's what it is. Slowly, that is becoming the expression. That's the irony. A good criticism or a humor and a humorous criticism is giving way to a language which is carping. And I think all of you see in the visual media also, one competes against the other to take the benchmark higher.
Yes, Your Lordship. Thank you, Your Lordship.
Thank you, Lordship. And we have Naveen with a question, Lordship. Naveen, please post it.
Thank you, Your Lordship, for the valuable session. Lordship, my question is that, is Article 19 being a blockade and restraint on the government to effectively enforce preventing fake news and misinformation? Because when right to freedom of expression is a fundamental right, freedom of expression made with a malified intent to cause misinformation and fake news, does it also go against the policy of the fundamental right? So is the government being...
Yes, please continue.
Is a government being restrained and a blockade is being made on the government to make it a better regulations to prevent these fake news and misinformation? Your views, Lordship.
No, I think Article 19 is too important to give way to any other thought process, despite these challenges. And I don't think anything is a restriction. The only thing is when these laws were drawn, when the constitutions were drawn, this kind of technological challenges are not there. But every document is progressive and nothing is constant. The only thing which is constant is change. So changes have to occur. I am sure the government is not without remedy with relevant thought process to see how these platforms can bring in a self-regulation. I would any day prefer a self-regulation mechanism than to a government regulation mechanism. And I think the importance of the government is to press for these platforms and methods to meet regulation processes, which must be manned independently to curtail this kind of misinformation. I would still be very hesitant to give some kind of absolute power to the government on this.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Lordship. I think that brings an end to the questions also that we have. Can we call Senior Counsel Ms. S. Parthasarathy, our Chairman for the FBI Academy, to say his closing remarks and thank you.
It was such a wonderful lecture, my lord, and we are also happy that you could take some time out to be with us, and we wish that we come out of this situation early, and so that we have normal court working. Thank you, my lord, once again for taking out your lordship's precious time in the morning on a Sunday. We have disturbed you. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you and giving me an opportunity to say something from my heart on very many issues which may have troubled you.
Much obliged.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lord.
Thank you.
Thank you.